Imagine your country can't afford a bigger army, so it just hits a higher combat help button like a food delivery app. Those guys with beards, sunglasses, and tactical vests you see in modern war zones? A lot of them aren't soldiers, they're private military contractors. They fight, guard, train, and spy for money, not for flags. But are they just fancy mercenaries with better branding? Before we talk about Blackwater and Wagner, we need to rewind way back. Because hired guns are almost as old as war itself. In the ancient world, hiring foreign warriors was like installing a DLC pack for your army. Extra skills, no citizenship required. Greek city-states hired Scythian archers, Carthage hired Iberian fighters. If you had money, you could rent muscle. Of course, there was one tiny problem. Mercenaries were loyal to silver, not to you. If the money stopped, so did the loyalty. Carthage learned that the hard way. When it tried to cut pay after a war, its own hired fighters turned into a full-blown rebel army. Jump to medieval Europe, and mercenaries level up. Armored knights renting out their lances to the highest bidder? That's literally where we get the word freelance. A freelance. A knight whose spear was not tied to any one lord. Today we say, I'm a freelance designer with a latte in hand. 800 years ago it meant, I bring a horse and spear, pay me. Italian city-states took this to the next level with Condottieri, mercenary CEOs who signed multi-page war contracts. For them, war really was a business model. Protect this city, don't destroy that one, and please keep the loot somewhat polite. Sometimes these mercenary bosses switch sides mid-war if the other city paid better. Classic patch note for loyalty. In 1447, Milan's new Ambrosian Republic hired superstar mercenary Francesco Sforza as commander-in-chief. Basically, let's rent the final boss DLC army. A year later, Venice slid into Sforza's DMs with a better deal. Help us crush Milan, and we'll back you as Duke. For a condottiere, that's not betrayal, and that's a promotion. So Sforza flips. Yesterday, he was Milan's shield. Now he's the siege boss starving the city until they open the gates and crown him Duke. Loyalty patch notes. Now supports whoever pays for the throne. Even kings started to realize, if you leave war entirely to hired swords, they might decide you're the optional DLC. So from the 17th century, states slowly built standing armies. Permanent, salaried, our guys, not just rented muscle. The Peace of Westphalia in 1648 didn't ban mercenaries, but it pushed a new idea. States should own the legal violence franchise. In theory, only states could wage war. In practice, states kept quietly outsourcing the dirty work whenever it was convenient. By the 18th and 19th centuries, empires ran on a mix of regular troops, colonial auxiliaries, and yes, more hired guns. Britain's Gurkha units are a famous example. Nepali fighters so tough that London basically said, please never quit. The Gurkhas fought in 2 world wars, earning a reputation as the guys you really don't want on the other side. So by the 20th century, states had standing armies, but the old habit of hiring extra muscle never really died. Decolonization after World War II created chaos. New states, weak armies, and lots of outsiders willing to fight for a price. Congo in the 1960s became a mercenary playground. Secessionist regions literally hired foreign fighters to carve up the state. Diamonds and copper paid the bills. Ideology was optional. If you paid well, someone would bring a gun. In Biafra, a breakaway region of Nigeria, foreign pilots flew relief and weapons in neutral planes that somehow kept getting shot at. These post-colonial wars were a preview. Non-state actors, hired guns, and resources all tangled together in one messy knot. By the late Cold War, big powers were tired and broke, but the map was still on fire. Perfect conditions for semi-official hired guns. In southern Africa, one company would become the boss battle of 1990s mercenary history. Executive outcomes. They were hired by Angola's government to smash rebels who had tied the army in knots for years. Spoiler. They did it in months. Sierra Leone did the same. Diamond fields in exchange for a private war service that regular armies had failed to deliver. And for weak states, these firms looked like superheroes. Fast, effective, and not part of the messy local politics. But the bill was paid in diamonds and influence, not just cash. Outsourcing security meant outsourcing leverage. Then the Cold War ended. Millions of trained soldiers and mountains of hardware suddenly had no superpower to serve. If you're a former Special Forces operator in 1993 with no war and no pension, security contractor starts to sound very attractive. Meanwhile, in Washington and London, budget people discovered a magic word: outsourcing. From the 1990s to today, the private war business turned into a monster market, heading toward $500 billion. This is where the old mercenary idea evolves into something new: private military companies, or PMCs. On paper, PMCs are not mercenary gangs, they're registered companies with HR, legal teams, and PowerPoint slides. They claim key differences: legal contracts, state customers, and missions that include logistics, training, and intel, not just shooting. Walk into a modern PMC headquarters and it looks less like a barracks and more like a law firm with tactical merch. But the core product hasn't changed in 2,000 years. Selling organized violence, neatly wrapped in corporate language. Enter Blackwater, founded in 1997 by a former Navy SEAL who basically built a private training Disneyland for war. For a while, they were just the place where elite units came to shoot, drive, and blow things up more efficiently. Then came 9/11. Suddenly, the US needed more security everywhere, faster than the Army could recruit or deploy. In Afghanistan and Iraq, PMCs like Blackwater became the extra limbs of the US security apparatus. They guarded diplomats, ran convoys, trained local forces, and sometimes did jobs that looked a lot like combat. On paper, they were security, not soldiers. On the ground, Iraqis just saw more foreigners with guns. In 2004, 4 Blackwater contractors were ambushed in Fallujah. Their bodies were mutilated and hung from a bridge. Later investigations said they lacked armored vehicles, maps, and even proper planning. Casualties of cost-cutting and subcontracting. But the real breaking point came in 2007 at a traffic circle in Baghdad called Nisour Square. Blackwater guards opened fire, killing more than a dozen civilians. Parents, children, people just stuck in traffic. Iraqi witnesses called it a massacre. For many locals, it proved what they already felt: foreign guns could kill them with zero consequences. Years later, a U.S. court convicted several Blackwater guards. It looked like accountability might finally reach the contractors. And then, in 2020, a presidential pardon wiped those sentences away with a signature. Just like that. For critics, Nisour Square showed the nightmare scenario: lethal force without clear uniforms, unclear laws, and unclear justice. But Blackwater didn't die. It just changed names, merged, and kept operating under new brands. The business model survived. Meanwhile, another kind of PMC was growing in the shadows of Moscow: the Wagner Group. Officially, it was just a private company. Unofficially, it fought Russia's dirty wars in Ukraine, Syria, and across Africa. In Central African Republic and Mali, Wagner traded security for mining rights and political influence. Then came the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Wagner turned into a shock absorber for Russia's army. Tens of thousands of convicts were recruited straight from prisons with a simple offer: 6 months at the front, and you're free, if you live. At battles like Bakhmut, Wagner burned through men in brutal assaults. Human lives became just another expendable resource. In June 2023, Wagner's boss, Yevgeny Prigozhin, turned his guns around and marched toward Moscow in an open mutiny. The march stopped before reaching the Kremlin, but the message was loud: a private army had just scared a nuclear state. From Italian Condottieri to Wagner, one pattern repeats: when you rent warriors, sometimes they realize they can rent you. International law tried to get ahead of this problem by targeting mercenaries as illegal fighters. The 1977 Geneva Protocol defined mercenaries with 6 strict conditions. So strict that modern PMCs mostly slip through the holes. Don't fight directly, hire some locals, base your office in a nice western city, and suddenly you're not a mercenary, you're a service provider. A 1989 UN convention tried to ban mercenaries altogether, but major PMC powers never ratified it. So lawyers and activists pivoted. If we can't ban them, maybe we can at least tame them. In 2008, Switzerland and the Red Cross gathered states in Montreux and produced a key text: the Montreux Document. It doesn't create new law. Instead, it reminds states, if you hire or host PMCs, you still owe duties under existing law. It sketches 3 layers of responsibility: the individual contractor, the company, and the state that hires or hosts them. It's basically a "Dear Governments, you can't pretend you didn't know" letter, signed by dozens of states. But Montreux is soft law. It has no jail attached. Its power is peer pressure and reputation, not handcuffs. Meanwhile, modern weapons quietly got absurdly expensive. A medieval king bought knights. A modern state buys flying supercomputers. The curve for high-end tanks, jets, and missiles looks like a crypto chart. Up, up, and up again. Defense ministries face a nasty math problem. Each soldier is cheaper than a jet, but voters hate seeing soldiers die. PMC contractors become the tempting middle option. Politically quieter than conscripts, cheaper than permanent forces, on paper at least. From the pro-PMC side, the sales pitch writes itself. Surge capacity, flexible contracts, highly trained specialists on demand. For politicians, there's another perk. Contractor casualties don't show up in the same way as dead soldiers on the evening news. So let's stack the arguments. First, the pro-PMC camp. They fill gaps regular armies can't. They can move faster than state bureaucracies, especially for niche tasks like cyber, VIP protection, or training in remote places. They also let smaller states buy capabilities they could never build alone, like airlift, drones, or maritime security. If you draw it on a slide, the pro-PMC side looks neat. More flexibility, less political pain, plug-and-play expertise. Now the critics. They argue PMCs create a lethal gray zone where nobody is clearly legally in charge. When contractors abuse civilians, it's often unclear. Should we blame the individual, the firm, the client government, or all of the above? Put the pros and cons on one page and you get a very uncomfortable spreadsheet. Efficiency versus accountability. Flexibility versus control. There's also a moral question. Should the decision to use lethal force be driven by public debate or by a profit margin? At the extreme, critics fear PMCs can become war lobbies, companies that quietly benefit when conflicts don't really end. And behind all the acronyms, there are simple human stories. Families who don't care if the bullet came from a soldier or a contractor. So PMCs are here to stay. The question isn't yes or no, but under what rules and with how much sunlight? Stronger national laws, tougher licensing, real investigations, and maybe one day a binding global treaty. Those are the tools on the table. If war is becoming a subscription service, the final question is simple and uncomfortable. Would you trust your country's war to a private company?